Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. When it comes to EVE news, there's two items that have basically grabbed my attention over the last week. First of all, we've got the 4 keep stars that were threatened, you could say, at the start of the new conflict in nullsec. All of those have been saved. Basically, there was no big battle around the keep stars, which for a lot of players might be a little bit disappointing, especially if you were in there waiting for the action, hoping for the action, and then you basically get blue balled. That is not fun. On the other hand, I would say that this also means that this conflict won't be all that one-sided as what it looked like at first, so perhaps this can also mean that the conflict will drag on and now we can get, well, smaller battles than something that engages and means the destruction of 4 keep stars, still more battles that all in all could become pretty sizable and have a big impact on the market, which is of course what I'm currently speculating on, hoping that my Tech 2 ships can blow up at some point and things like that. So the war, it's definitely in a weird spot. We could go either way. I think from here we could de-escalate or we could drag the war out, and we'll have to wait and see how things develop, of course, as always. The other bit of news, of course, was the announcement that was not received very well by the player base, and I would say not by myself either. It was an announcement on the CCP website itself, so not directly related to EVE Online, but they basically announced that they have secured like 40 million of external funding to develop a game set in the EVE Online universe, separate from EVE Online itself, but set in our universe, and is going to be what they call a AAA blockchain game. So that was definitely not received too well. I sort of don't understand that such a tone-deaf announcement can be put up there if CCP should realize how wary and how critical the EVE Online player base is from blockchain, cryptocurrency, NFTs and things like that. Now, of course, it's a CCP website, so it's more meant, I think, towards investors and things like that. But overall, definitely a weird choice of announcement, especially when it's still so vague again, when we still don't know anything about the shooter. They're starting development on yet another game where we know nothing, right? We don't know what type of game it is, no gameplay, nothing, not a single screenshot. Definitely feels like a really weird choice to make, especially from my personal perspective. What I've been trying to follow as well in the last couple of weeks has basically been the development for like ChatGPT and what Google is doing, right? The big battle around what they're calling AI, and I'm not really sure if I would call it artificial intelligence just yet, but it's definitely pretty interesting, and that's what the whole hype is about at the moment. And you know, just spitballing ideas here, thinking about what that could potentially mean for gaming. I could see like a ChatGPT like system be integrated in, well, like Aura, mission agents, things like that, so they could just basically ask for a mission, and you could even set your own parameters, like, you know, I've got an hour's time, so I want a mission that's like 45 minutes, takes me 10 jumps out, 15 jumps out, whatever it is, focused on combat, and there you go. Then a system like that could conceivably, I mean, obviously, I'm not a dev myself. It's all, you know, I'm explaining it like it would be super easy, but I can basically see that such a system be a possibility, considering the way that type of technology is evolving, and I think that would be received quite a lot better by the player base than a blockchain announcement. Now, if you want to play devil's advocate, blockchain, it's basically like sort of database technology, you could say, right? An immutable set of information that's constantly built upon. So if it's only that, sort of see it's okay, but I don't really see how you're gonna like build a game just around blockchain and not try to like monetize it with like a cryptocurrency level NFTs. I hope that CCP learned their lesson, that that's not exactly the route you should take, but we'll see, of course, how all of that develops as well. But from my perspective, definitely a little bit disappointing that we still don't know anything about the shooter that they're working on. And yet they're doing another announcement where, well, the first reflex is, yeah, there we go, another vaporware project that has been announced by CCP that's gonna potentially cost us hours potential development time for EVE Online itself. So we will, of course, have to see what CCP announces further down the line. Alright, let's jump in then. First of all, a quick look at the New Eden store. I did receive another mail when it comes to some sort of sale. Oh, there we go. 3 days for a single plex. So that just means 500 plex for a month, and that's 10 plex for a month. That's really weird. Can you keep chaining that or something? Not really sure, but that's a weird one. And then we've got on the services front, just a new service, nothing special in sales or anything like that to report. So that, can you do that like 1,000 times? 3,000 plex for 1,000 for 3,000. 1,000 plex for 3,000 days of Omega time. I'm sure there's a limit set to that. And it's probably set up as like a teaser for alpha players. You know, just get a single plex and you get to experience the Omega version of the game for 3 days. I think that's the setup. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong on that. Next up, of course, why we're all here, which is the market. Let's start with pilot services, and that's coming in at 6 minutes. There we go. Let's start with Plex and the Plex chart. You can see we're basically starting to move sideways. I think at this point the market and a lot of the players are in a wait-and-see approach because 20-year anniversary is coming and a new announcement from CCP should be coming out. That's usually when we see the market hold its breath a little bit before deciding which direction to go in next. 4.5, almost 4.6 million for the sellers in JITA, and a little bit of action actually in Tranquility Trading Tower trying to undercut us here. 4.4 million for the buyers. And well, there also a little bit of action definitely in the Tranquility Trading Tower. Look at that here, buying 10,000 plex at just shy of 4.4 million. Pretty narrow spread between sellers and buyers here. 5-day, 20-day moving average all coming together. As I've said, we are going to see where we go from here. Next up, we have the multiple pilot train certificate that did go up substantially. You can see how the volumes now have gone down to next to nothing. 2.4 million for the sellers, 1.9 million for the buyers. That's like almost $500 million in spread here. That's pretty significant on this jump up. It does mean, I think, that basically lacking supply at all. So everyone wants close to 2.4 billion for that multiple pilot train certificate, but there's just not enough buyers on the market to really maintain that type of a price. You can see though on the daily averages we did go up to like 2.6, 2.7 billion a couple of days ago over the last week. So it's going to be interesting to see if this can generate enough supply and that this is seen as an opportunity, but for now volumes are down, so that does not look to be the case. Skill extractors next. Despite doing a different type of chart from Plex itself while being very strongly correlated, which is of course due to this massive sale that happened here in January. At the end here we are coming to the same conclusion. For the last couple of weeks we are hesitating, not sure which way to go. Volumes not that great over the last couple of days either. We're stuck in the 518 million for the sellers and 506 for the buyers. What a difference with the trading certificate. Definitely a tiny spread for something that costs $500 million. Then we have the injectors. Here are the large scale injectors that are still slowly trending up with hesitation at the tail end, but I think that's because of today's price that still has to basically be set. Flat at the highest range for the year and probably the highest range ever. 940 million for the sellers, 903 for the buyers. We're still in a pretty damn small spread. I think less than 5% here on these large scale injectors. That is not a lot for something that is close to the 1-year high point. Small scale injectors should not really be able to beat that trend. Again, a little bit more volatility in this market is visible, but overall last couple of weeks basically flat at the highest range for the year. 194 million to 180. That's actually interesting. That is a 14 million. That's definitely above the 5, getting closer to the 10% in spread between sellers and buyers. That's a difference, and that's also potentially where that slightly more volatility in the small scale injector market comes from. But I would say I'd keep a closer eye on the small scale injectors, because they may be the first one to really set a trend that will then probably be followed by the large scale injectors, Plex markets, etc. So it could be interesting to keep an eye on this one that already has that larger spread, counter to all the others basically. Then we get the daily alpha injector, tiny little bump here going above 50 million. We're talking 52, 53 million for most sellers and 48 million for the buyers. Again, pretty narrow spread, but closer to a 10%. It's probably not panic time just yet for the central bank of EVE Online, which is CCP, of course, but we are above the 50 at this point. Buyers still just below that, but not by all that much. I think the trend is going to be pretty much inevitable, although if you look at the volumes, there's definitely quite significant volumes, but look at the days. So these are definitely older sell orders as well. A little bit of buying, a little bit of realizing that in all likeliness we are set to again go up, and then you do have to sell before CCP comes in with their next intervention. But this could still be basically anything you buy below 50 could be an opportunity just a couple of weeks down the line if we can chew through all of this, getting to that 55, and then you can see 60 million is coming into view pretty quickly. So yeah, daily alpha injectors, definitely another one that I personally am keeping an eye on to see what the thinking of CCP is behind the services market. And then finally we have the hypercores that are actually showing an interesting trend here, continuing to go down, slowing down. 20-day, 5-day moving average starting to come together, but definitely substantially below the 500,000 mark at this point. 458,000 to 441,000, definitely quite a drop from the 1-year high point at 600,000, and even the previous range that was well above 500,000 as well. So for the hypercores, Hypernet Relay, less activity, less interest, a little bit of a bump here with Plex for good, but otherwise this one is actually expecting or showing slightly either lower activity, potentially a little bit of deflation as well here. So definitely a wait and see pilot services this week, I think, and a lot will depend on announcements, and I sort of hope we don't get too many blockchain announcements anymore, but rather some actual stuff for the game, like the next expansion, 20 years anniversary, what's planned around that. We will of course wait and see. Next up we have the minerals market at 12 minutes. Let's go through these. You may already have noticed on the ticker, not a bad week for titanium, again pushing up from that for ISK. So the market does not want to go below that. There's plenty of buyers, I think, that are willing to pay for ISK for titanium, and sellers coming in at around 430, 426, 427, hundreds of millions of units. Supplies are still quite ample, but buyers are still above the 4 ISK. As long as that's there, I think we're in a pretty good spot for those high miners, even though on the full 1-year chart, or let's say the last couple of months, this is not the best price you've gotten. On the full 1-year chart, this is definitely still pretty decent. I would not hesitate to sell or do a 50-50. At this point, I don't see any reason to not sell any titanium that you're mining at the moment. Then for the general trend for high-sec, we do have pyrite that lost some of its gains, but is able to defend the 10 is decently well. Almost 11 for the sellers, 960 for the buyers though, so the first sign of hesitation here in the high-sec minerals, potentially exacerbated because of course those 4 keep stars were not tested again by the attackers in nullsec. That could of course mean that we delay, or we don't have the conflict as big as some people were hoping for. That means we need less resources, and so the buyers here seem to already be anticipating lower prices. Could put a lot of pressure on this. If we break the 10 on both sellers and buyers, we're in for a bad time. And then we get Mexon for high-sec as well. That's coming out close to the 60. Buyers probably well below that at this point. Nope, look at that. Buyers at 60.02. I did not expect that. Almost 61 for the sellers. So here for Mexon, I would say same story as with titanium, with maybe even a little bit of an edge towards sell right now, because of course there is clearly pressure on the price, and there is an expectation, I think, in the market that's starting to take hold that maybe we won't need that many minerals, that many resources to replace the losses that'll happen in this war. A longer term, could change the dynamic, but a longer term conflict with smaller destruction fights, I think, could also mean that that bump here was a little bit too much, and that we're set for a very, very slow and steady, potentially not even increase in price, but just trying to hold a certain range, which is already being threatened here for pyrite. So overall for high-sec miners, perhaps looking at the full list here, maybe sell. Just try to make your ISK at this point and be safe from that perspective. For LOSEC then, we've got sort of the same story, also confirming hesitation, while Isogen did really nicely, of course, and within my personal expectations going to the 600. If we had an actual big fight around the keep stars, I think we would have continued to go up, but here you can see that we are heading back towards the 600. 20-day moving average is right on top of that, 615 to 603. So obviously coming from LOSEC, it is a little bit different, but you can see that there's no stratospheric rise expected or expecting huge destruction that's coming in here. We're at the 600 for Isogen, a new, in all likeliness, range, but this could become the range, I think. Taking a quick look at the volumes, especially on the front page, this is normal, this is doable for active supply demand, and then you can browse down to like a 625 to get to 22 million, another at 640, another at 645, and then you got to go to the 650 range, and then 1000 disk, that's more than Noxium. Don't think that's too realistic, but you can see how if we had destruction of keep stars, I think we would have been able to chew through a couple of those 20 millions and maybe tested 620, 630, something like that. Maybe even a 645. That would have been quite significant to continue to go up until this range, but because I think of what happened in nullsec, everything is slowing down here. Then we have Noxium coming in for nullsec. Yeah, same story again, right? Step up, step up, step up. But here at the tail end, clearly hesitation. 930 to 917. Think 600, 900, maybe a little bit more, right? Towards 700 is still a possibility for Isogen, but I think that'll end up becoming like the high range, and a real pullback from that is possible. So yeah, interesting. I think we're setting the price ranges finally for Isogen, and you can also see now that for first time in a pretty long time, both of them are basically showing the same response to what happened over the last week in EVE Online. We're getting very close to that. So those that still need to sell, again, don't completely spook the market, but I think I would definitely consider selling a lot of my Isogen at this point as well. And then for nullsec, we have Zydrine that also does that same move. In fact, 5-day moving average going straight down below the 20-day moving average. That's interesting. 2,300 to 2,150, pretty narrow margin here still. Someone mentioned that there are some types of belts in HiSec that are yielding potential Zydrine. I haven't read anything about that. I've been really busy in real life, and next week is like the last week where I have to continue to give my training together with my colleague to some other colleagues. So month of April, I'm hoping to have a little bit more time, but it's still really tough for me in real life at the moment. But yeah, Zydrine going down is actually a bit of a surprise if you saw on the ticker, because Megasite is continuing to go up, 1-year high point. And this is kind of a crazy price, 3,400 for the sellers, 3,100 for the buyers, though that's a 10% spread that's opening up for Megasite. That is unusual, so this is perhaps a little bit speculative, a little bit too much too quickly. I think we could pull back from here, but clearly Megasite is going in a different direction, is showing a different dynamic from basically all the other minerals at this point, continuing to build to quite surprising strengths. And then finally we've got Morphite that is, ooh, that's interesting. Definitely feels like this could be a real breakdown. So usually when you go below the 40 million, supplies start to hesitate, and eventually sellers are able to push the price, their sell price back above 40k, which they're then happy with. But look at this, this is a pretty sharp decline. Sellers are just below the 40k, but they're below the 40,000, and that could be capitulation. And then buyers are like probably smelling a little bit of blood, a little bit of hesitation here, pulling down to 37,000, hoping that they can convince sellers to not go back, not hold back, and try to get the price back above 40k. So that's definitely, that has potentially a little bit of momentum here. So you gotta be careful for Morphite that is coming down quite sharply all of a sudden. Not what I expected in the entire mineral market, to be honest. All of this is quite surprising on a strange week, I would say, from the nullsec war perspective. For the PI markets at 1930. let's take a look at this. I'm sort of expecting a little bit of a breather here as well, but I'm still of the opinion that this is the capital ship production bottleneck at this point. So let's see what's happening. Oh man, look at that, all of a sudden at those minimum prices while they're already shooting up for broadcast nodes. Definitely feels like a little bit of a break when we were at 2.5 million last week. 2.4, well, a little bit above that actually already for the sellers, but 2.1 million for the buyers. That is definitely a larger spread than what we've been used to for, well, the last couple of months, I would say, for broadcast nodes. So perhaps that first sign here as well, that I would say the market is, in all, my read of this for the market would be, well, they're not going after those keep stars, so there is that hesitation to go into a big capital, super capital brawl. So perhaps what we'll see now is a smaller conflict with sub-capital fleets, and that really doesn't need that much replacement for advanced PI material, for instance. So we are starting to try to lower our buy orders of all of this stuff. Construction blocks doing the same thing, heading back for the 10,000 disc pretty quickly, 10,696, which I would say is still a very good price, still a really normal, nice price for construction blocks. This on quite a bit of selling happening, so maybe some speculators coming in and giving up as well, or trying to take as much profit, maybe even too much profit, crashing the price down to 10k. But overall, this is that same pause. Then we have coolants that are flat at a pretty high range at the moment. 12,000 for the sellers, 11,600 for the buyers. Now tied to fuels, etc. So this is definitely a little bit different. And the reason why I've always gone for fuel-related PI materials myself. Mostly at the moment I'm doing quite a big spread of different stuff, but historically I've always focused my personal PI efforts on coolants, on stuff tied to fuels, where you have this constant destruction, this constant need. And so even if during the war they don't need to replace lots of carriers, super carriers and titans and things like that, so they don't need the advanced PI materials, well, if you're on deployment, you're moving stuff around, you need fuel blocks. You're usually also deploying structures, right? You want those active, so you need fuel blocks, etc, etc, etc. There is this constant destruction of fuel blocks that does give it, well, more stability, right? So you don't have those massive peaks, but you can basically have a little bit more of a better price on downturns as well. Enriched uranium, you can see again buyers dropping out a little bit here, but starting to catch back up. But this is that definitely that hesitation that I'm seeing here. Buyers not willing to push up and up and up, and sellers are now below 13,000 disc. Integrity response drones basically flat for the week as well, slightly up for the tail end, 3.3 to 3.2 million. Definitely feels like it's a bottleneck, I would say. Then we have the mechanical parts doing pretty well, a little bit all over the place in the last couple of days. So here you can see maybe someone came in a little bit early with speculative selling and some buying as well. Maybe look at that price going up during those 2 days, but since then we have basically been all over the place for mechanical parts. 11.8 to 10.8 though, still a great price, no doubt. Miniature electronics finally doing a little bit of a stop to its ascent of the last 1.5 months, going from 12,500 disc to 22,500 disc. Crazy price. 21,000 to, well, look at that, 18.6. That's definitely a sizable spread that's opened up here between sellers and buyers. So that's interesting. Does look like buyers are signaling that maybe we shouldn't continue the hype too much. Nano factories back down to a 1.4 million to a 1.1 million, so definitely opening up a little bit of spread here as well. Organic motor applicators, well, last week was a 1 year high point, so this is not too surprising, but getting close to 1.5. It's now at 1.3 million to 1.2 million. Recursive computing modules, very sharp increase here, went up to 4 million, but you can see how those daily averages are starting to come down significantly, and then those buy prices, people are successfully buying quite a lot lower as well. All of a sudden 3.3 to 2.7 million, quite a bit of volume though. Players mentioned that a part of what's coming next will require a lot of recursive computing module, but of course I think the market's also realizing that that may not be as structural as capital ships, for instance. Then we got our robotics. Ooh, I like that. I definitely am going to consider looking for those plasma planets now. 115,000 to 103,000. Again, tied to fuels, doing a little bit better. On hesitation, on a downturn. That has been my reason to focus on fuel-related PI when it comes to what I produce myself. Rocket fuel holding quite well to that 15k. Yeah, 15.4 to 14.5, so pretty decent spread, nothing too special. Self-harmonizing power cores landing on the 2.5 million, 2.7 for the sellers, well above 2.5 still for the buyers. So that was basically one peak, and we're back at that highest range of the year. Smart fab units, a little bit of pressure on this one. Again, volumes are not great, so buyers can drop out very quickly. 80 to 67,000. Big volumes here, haven't had that much of an impact on the market. So overall, I think more sellers than buyers on this one. But that's always been actually also the same reason, right? When it comes to consumption through destruction, you know, specialized PI materials like this can have this very irregular amounts of being traded a day, which is quite different from something that's tied to fuel blocks that has a far stronger base of trading, so keeping things a little bit more there we go, we were at smart fab units, a little bit more stable, and sometimes when it's at a high point, you know, at a better price. Sterile conduits also pulling back a little bit from that 1.5, but just below that for the sellers, and then below 1.3 million for the buyers as well. So opening up a bit of spread. Supercomputers, right, as well, went above 150, yep, and is now at 145, 135. I mean, it's still super expensive, but clearly the dynamic of this week is, well, let's wait and see what happens with the war as well. Synthetic oil definitely starting to come down substantially from the high point at 15,000, 13.5 to, well, not that many buyers anymore. That's really a big difference here. The amount of buyers dropping out is significant. Synthetic synapses still at 130, so I think everyone that's selling and making these is quite happy. Transcranial microcontrollers landing on 100,000 discs, so go well below that you can buy, but that's not on the cards just yet, I don't think. Water-cooled CPU 9.5 to 7.8, very large spread opening up here as well. And then finally the wetware mainframes went below 2.5 million, and there is still enough demand out there to take advantage of that. So we're back at 2.8 for the sellers here. So for the PI market, definitely same story, I would say, as with the pilot services. The market's hesitating. This time it's probably not because we're waiting for a CCP announcement, but now we're gonna wait to see how the war in Nullsec evolves. Definitely an interesting time though. In the markets. Next we've got advanced moon materials at 27.40. Here my expectation basically pretty stable as well, maybe a little bit like this, slightly downwards pressure as well. If you're then expecting potentially less action in Nullsec, that means more room for the members to go back to their moon mining. So for crystalline carbonite, slightly downwards, nowhere near going to 100 disc, but we are at 145 to 133, buyers opening up a little bit of spread. For Caldari, it's titanium carbide, flat at 150. There's not that much to say on this one. For Minmatar, slightly downwards pressure, but basically decently stable, 110 to 106. It's not that great of a margin compared to a year ago, but it's a 10%. And then for Amar, that was doing surprisingly well last week, that's continuing the trend. That's interesting, doing its own thing. Amar tungsten carbide up to 183, 175. If this is an item you speculated on, I would definitely try to take some profits at this point. Let's see if this translates to the metamaterials. So for Galente, we've got photonic metamaterials going up. All right, I have to start to look at my placements as well, because I have some metamaterials that I invested in before here, the nerf to moon mining, that increased the price, so lucky on the timing. But this is interesting. 12,570 for one, but then above 13,000 for most sellers, 10,600 for the buyers. Definitely feels like it's a supply issue though. Then we've got Caldari with non-linear metamaterials, also able to get close to a 15,000 for the sellers, almost 15,000 for the buyers as well. So here it feels like it's demand driven, definitely interesting as well. If you bought like around 10,000, you get that 50% profit. Minmatar, considering the carbide, I'm not expecting too much here. Yeah, slightly up though. Sellers, yes, a couple days ago were at 12.5. They're now at 13.4. Definitely a bit of a buying spree happening here. 12,000 for the sellers. And then finally for Minmatar metamaterials, continuing the climb as well. Look at that. Best price in quite a long time. 20,000 ISK almost for the sellers. 19,000 for the buyers. Definitely something to consider, especially if, like me, you bought during these bottom times. So I bought some metamaterials like 10,000 below 10,000 ISK. For the Minmatar version here, Terahertz metamaterials, 100% profit is on the books right now. And at least some of them, for the Galente one I'm not sure, but some of them do feel like they're demand driven. So that's a nice opportunity for you to actually sell because the demand is there as well. So metamaterial traders who followed that part should definitely look at taking profits. Now again, always be careful with your volumes, don't spook the market too much. But this is nice. This is a pretty nice increase across the board for all metamaterials. Should not be ignored. Let's see what the other advanced materials are signaling. Fermionic condensates flat for the last 2 weeks or so. So not much to say here. Ferrogel went to a 1-year high point and is now flat. Actually, that's pretty nice recovery. 27,000 to 26,000 compared to the bottom range of like around 15 to 20,000. That's a pretty nice full recovery of Ferrogel. But most of these are then, I think, pretty stable. Fullerite went to a 1-year high point, lost all of that, but is back at that 700 ISK range. Hypersynaptic fibers are flat above 6K. Nano transistors next, a little bit of a bump here that's easily absorbed, and then we're back at 3000K. So all of these have basically recovered, regained some value thanks to the nerf that happened in December, but they're all definitely stabilizing at those new ranges. 1400 to 1373, very narrow spreads on all of these as well. Pressurized oxidizers went to 1-year high point, new supply and some speculation probably coming in, and we're back at that 12.5, which is, well, a little bit of a gain and a nice gain from the bottom range. 12.7 to 12,000, again decently narrow margin here as well. Reinforced carbon fiber slowly coming to that new range here too. 13.3 to 12.9, that's not a lot of spread. Ceramic fibers fully stabilizing below the 400, 375, 355. All of that does feel like at this point advanced materials have successfully moved into that new range and are probably able to just start moving up and down within a new range without too much effort, but nothing too special to report except for the Minmatar related items. So if we go here, they are Amar items, excuse me, they are continuing a rather relentless climb here, so that's interesting. Maybe a null-sig meta, even for subcaps, that can have its impact here, but definitely very impressive 1-year high points, so I would try to take some profits off the table. Does this mean opportunity in Tech 2 ships? Coming in at 33 minutes. Let's take a look at these. Last week was already really nice. Quite a few sell opportunities that we spotted there. Let's see what the Basilisk is doing. Just landing on the 150. Yeah, 150 for the sellers, 141 for the buyers. So for those that were hoping to get back to 110 million Basilisk, that's not coming back, unfortunately. But it does mean that if you look at the previous spike up to 180, perhaps buying below 150, buying close to 140, is the new place to jump in on the Basilisk trade, for instance. So that is, I think, part of the exercise here. Spot the sell opportunities, but try to find those new ranges, and then you can try to actively trade in Tech 2. Cerberus, surprisingly slow and steady, basically step up, step up, step up. We're also above 150, but the spread won't be that great. 156 to 138. That starts to be, that is actually, yeah, look at that, opened up over the last couple of days again as well. So here you actually have a chance to buy a Cerberus below 140 million. if I were not holding my own already and waiting for those pronounced 1 year high points, I would say that's still an opportunity to try and get in on a Cerberus trade. I cannot see buyers be able to go that much lower. Supply is decent. You can see a little bit of gap opening up here, so maybe a little bit of too much supply that came in over the last couple of days is creating this jumping point below 140. Definitely for me an interesting data point. That 140 for the cruiser hulls does seem to be something to look at. Then we get the curse easily flat at 180, well 174 now for the sellers, 165 for the buyers. Definitely in sell territory if you bought below 130. Then we get the damnation. You can see double spikes at 400 million, coming back down below the 350, 346 too. Less than 300 million for the buyers. Is that 300 million the new price point where you can jump in for a damnation for a lot of command ships? Maybe. So very interesting as well. Definitely a pullback, definitely hesitation as well from the last week that is permeating the market, which is not good news if you're like hoping for way more volatility to come out. Of course, then you need ever bigger battles, more losses, more desperate players that want their Tech 2 ships. And so the Deacon here went to a 30 million a couple of weeks ago, 21 to 19. That's too low a spread, so but maybe below 20 is going to become the new jumping point for the Deacon. Then the Eagle 150 to 180, very flat within that range, 163 to 150 as well. For the EOS, yeah, a couple of weeks ago, you can see that sell opportunity, or 10 days ago or so, fully materializing up to 400 million ISK on one of those days, and then now is starting to come back down, of course, as some players do take profits. 314 to 294, still very expensive in my book, because I'm still holding my EOS that I bought at 254, I think it was. So overall, this is nice. This is nice for those Tech 2 trades, but I think part of the exercise now, especially on the hesitation in the market in general, is try to spot that new bottom range. That can be very interesting. So the Aries is at 58 to 53. Wouldn't honestly make a move on that just yet, but right, same story. Clearly not willing to make another 1 year high just yet. Flycatcher, that was super nice as well. Very nice 1 year high point, 70 million, something like that was easily possible. We go back down, maybe a little bit too much. Look at that. Buyers probably getting close. Let's see if I can get a range close to that here. Yeah, below 45 million. And then you can clearly see, whoa, that's quite low. Maybe we went a little bit overboard as we start to push back up here. So that's the pattern I think that you do want to see. Clearly here they said nope, enough buyers coming in, and we all of a sudden just straight up move back from 45 million on some buyers, and averages crashing below the 50 to no, we're trading the Flycatcher at 55 million. 57 to 46 at the moment for the Flycatcher, but that's an interesting pattern and definitely something to look for. If the sellers become overzealous and they push the buyers below 45 million for the Flycatcher, and you can be one of those that snags it, I think that is, for instance, a nice scenario to continue your Tech 2 trading. The Guardian, yeah, that one is just not going anywhere. Logistics cruisers definitely part of the meta, 180 to 163, so very expensive and still basically a sell opportunity if you have a cheap one. Heretic, that's unexpected, but very nice to see, and could point towards maybe preparations for, as I said, sub-capital fights coming into play. But we pushed up to 50 million 1 year high points a couple of weeks ago, and now we're pushing at 70 million for most sellers. One guy coming in at 57 million, 44 for the buyers, but definitely a very nice sell opportunity for the Heretic. Double jump to another higher price point. If you hold a couple of these, I would definitely try to sell. Then we get the Hound, went to a 25, coming back down. Same story here, I would say. I'll wait and see if, for instance, we can get buyers below 20 million. Do you have an opportunity to buy there? Is that your new range? That's part of the way I'm looking at Tech 2 at the moment. Ikitursak continuing to slowly head down below 500 million, 506 to 467, and with these averages you're definitely buying at a lower range, so can be interesting for those that want the Triglavian gamble, and then we get the Ishtar back at 180, so 176 to 160 for the buyers. That's still quite a bit of a spread that's available here. The Kirin, right, 1 year high point at 30 million. We're starting to come down, but for those that again are hoping for that jumping point, we're just stopping at 25 to 24. Here's the new price for the Kirin. So no overshoot on the Kirin supply all of a sudden. Manticore also slow and steady, getting those buyers back to 20 million. Yeah, 20 to 21.5, tiny spread, so that's not too good. And then a little bit later than the others, but the Nemesis just did a bit of a jump, 22 million, 18 million, not that great. I was hoping for more from the stealth bombers, but again, right, if you're bashing a Keepstar, it's probably a little bit harder to do those stealth bomber runs, but on you know, more spread out sub-capital fights, right? Some badly placed battleship fleets that can be targeted by stealth bombers, and then you get caught in a bubble. Interdictors going up in price, for instance. I think under the new circumstance, when it's not just one massive blob fighting over a Keepstar, there's more room for speculating on the stealth bombers doing their thing. The Nighthawk continuing to go down, and look at that, below the 280 for the buyers, 305 to 267. Same story. Is this the time to jump in? That is probably our new homework for Tech2 trading. Oneros definitely having a little bit of a breakdown for those buyers as well. 156 to 137, nice double top, so be careful on the other side of that. Then we get the Purifier. Here was a nice sell opportunity at 30, and we're holding off from really crashing below the 20 at this point. 24 to 22 million. I'm not sure. The Rook, that's definitely a bit of a surprise here again as well. Look at that, we were close to the 150 or just below that for the buyers, and yet this comes as a bit of a surprise. We can all of a sudden push even lower by quite a step. So that's what you have to be careful of when you assume that you're there. Oh, below 150, that's the time to jump in. Sometimes the market can tell you, nope, that's not the case just yet. We're in fact going below a 140 million for the buyers of the Rook. Then we get the Saber, just went up to the 60 million, and of course we're starting to come down from that. We're still at 52 to 47 million, so it really does look like the new range is going to be set here for the Saber. Scalpel, still substantially below 20, but 18 million, so that's not the spread to be jumping in on. Scimitar, slowly back down a bit for the week, 146 to 136. Yeah, not my move just yet. Sleipnir, what's that looking like? 280 to 254. Not a lot of buyers here, of course. If you get the buyers below 250, I think that's a nice jumping point, but will that materialize? Not sure. Vagabond, yeah, a little bit, not a lot of spread, a little bit high here, so you could maybe sell for some profits, but it's not that great yet. And then the Zarmast also staying below 500, 563 to 422. Look at that. Buyers for Triglavian definitely dropping out a little bit, although just a couple of weeks ago you could have bought below 400 million. That's obviously a better jumping point. So for Tech2, clearly a couple of weeks ago, or the last couple of weeks, were the times to take some profits. Quite a few players are obviously doing that as well, because prices are coming down. But it's a very mixed picture how things will go from here, because we have some that have been able to do an even higher price point, then we have some that are really crashing down to very low buyers, and others that are just settling a couple million below the 1 year high point and are stabilizing, both sellers and buyers coming together at that new range. So it's very difficult at the moment if you still need to jump in. So I myself am still holding quite a few ships, and I'm basically hoping that we can get some of those crazy sell opportunities across the board. But we'll have to see, of course. That depends a little bit, I think, on Nullsec as well. Next up, the Tech3 ship market coming in at 43.35. And let's start with the destroyers that definitely were part of the meta last week. So we have the Confessor continuing to stay very expensive, 65 million, not because we just don't see them. The availability is really next to nothing. 53 million for the buyers. Volumes actually holding on decently well despite these high prices. personally, I can only see some Noslic buying behind a move like this. Then we get the Hecate, slight jump for the week as well, but already coming back down on the day. Volumes are pretty reasonable here, 59 million to 53 million. Availability better in total volumes, but the amount of sell orders is nothing, and you can clearly see people basically bought out up until a certain price point, considering the amount of days that are left on these buy orders. And then the Jackdaw did a jump to 80 million. That definitely spurred a little bit of supply to come in here. 65 to 60 million, still very expensive though. So even a jump to, what is the Confessor at, 65 million is not bringing in a huge rush of ships. I still basically think that while it is part of a meta, it has its use in certain fleet doctrines, I think. Overall, for the player base, it's not that interesting to fly tactical destroyers at this point. And then finally we get this Vepel that's still stuck below 50. That could change. Availability is already next to nothing here, 52. But the most expensive one is at 54. Anything happening outside of GDAP? Nope, just with that. So that's kind of weird considering all the others. If you want to take a gamble, buy as Vapel now and hope that even this 100 Vapels, because they're so much cheaper than all the others, do get bought out, and that we also get a move like for the Confessor, the Hecate, tiny one, but like the Jackdaw as well. It could still happen in this Vapel. It does feel like a big gamble to take, but it is a possibility, I think. It can also be manipulated, right? You don't need that much ISK to grab every single Vapel that's still for sale and then put them up at that newer range. That could happen. Next we have the cruisers. So here is the Legion chart. Alright, buyers starting to come down here. That's definitely interesting. Nowhere near the 180 just yet, but 205 to 188. Alright, 180 coming slowly coming into view here for the Legion. That would be a very nice jumping point, but clearly a little bit too much supply and buyers starting to drop off a little bit. If this has enough momentum, maybe like below 185 or something like that, we could decide to try a buy order on this one. Then we have the Loki chart that just did another jump up to 230 and is coming back down to the 200 million, 203 to, ooh, and 183. That's what I like to see. That's what I like to see. If suppliers are desperate enough here all of a sudden and we see too many break down below the 200, buyers dropping off close to or below the 180, you all of a sudden have enough momentum to create a jumping point, grab a cheap Loki, and then look to trade that at 200 million plus. Look at those minimum prices. That is surprising, but that's the volatility that in my opinion makes tech tree trading in cruisers far more interesting than in the destroyers. Then we've got the Proteus starting to break down as well. Look at those minimum prices continuously edging down, so we're getting very close to the previous one, probably below 185 at this point. 185 for the first buyer. Lose this guy, buy below 185, and you probably have a nice jumping point for the Proteus already. But if this has enough momentum, maybe we could test the 180 again. That could be interesting as well. So that feels like this is a chart where a trader can keep an eye on that and make decisions. And then finally we get the Tengu. That is, yeah, still basically a little bit too expensive to jump in, but coming down. So 208 to 193. Need a bit of patience, but the Proteus is nice, very interesting. The Loki, very volatile, sharp drop off. That could have momentum as well. So for those that are looking to buy into the tech tree cruiser markets, I would keep an eye on those two because opportunity might just be around the corner. And then for the extra product of the week, someone requested that I take another look at the ice products. I will honor that request for the 820. And the main reason was they wanted to see if there's not a continued impact considering what was happening in Nullsec, and so I think unfortunately we'll be disappointed there considering the latest news on the subreddit from Nullsec. So I think hesitation here will show up as well. So let's go manufacturing materials and ice products. Let's take a look. Well, their request was specifically for the isotopes first, so let's get that going. Here are the helium isotopes. So you see what happened, right? We went to 500, then we went to 600, then we broke through the 600 mark. But now in the last week, clearly, again, just like with the minerals, just like with some PI materials, the market is saying, yeah, maybe it's not gonna be that much of a hot war, that much of a super capital slugfest. And you can see how those minimum prices are starting to come back down as well. Helium isotopes at a 582 to a 545. Definitely still expensive, but clearly not keeping up the hype. Then the next one is hydrogen isotopes, easily landing on the 500 as well, and minimum prices sometimes below that, 507 to 482. Right, big bump to 600, but then that's a nope over the last week or so. Then we've got nitrogen isotopes, went above 600, is now below 600, and I'm seeing pressure at the tail end here. We're down to 545 for the first seller, 537 for the buyers, so there's definitely a little bit of unloading that's happening here as well. And then oxygen isotopes, 1 year high point about 600, but that downtrend here, right, we stalled here 584, 585, but now in the last couple of days we're like, nope, sellers coming in at 553, buyers at 521, which is still pretty damn good on the 1 year chart, but of course away from the hype, away from that 1 year high point. We'll take a quick look at the others as well. Here is heavy water, plenty of supplies obviously, 125, pretty average on the 1 year chart, 124 to 117. Then we get liquid ozone, that is, well, slightly up over the last couple of weeks, but really a 110 to 130, it's not that much of a move. And then strontium is very weird, bad chart. Let's see if I can get something. Ooh, strontium is taking off. All right, that's interesting. Counter to everything else, strontium has just gone 3.5, 3.9, so almost 4,000 is coming into play. 2,900 for the buyers. Slight sell opportunity, and that's been a very long time, if I'm not mistaken, for strontium, because we are at a 3.5. That's super close to a 1 year high point. And if we can shoot through that one and get to the 4,000 range, we are at that 1 year high point. So very interesting. I did not expect that. Must have something to do with the war. I'm not exactly sure what strontium is used for at this point anymore. But that one is shooting up, while all the others are showing that same hesitation that we've seen basically throughout this entire EVE talk. Pilot services, PI, minerals, all of them are showing, we're not sure if we're gonna need that much in resource, if we'll see that much destruction in the upcoming, well, whatever the time frame is that the market decides on. So overall, very different vibe from last week, I would say. There we had lots of high points, sell your Tech 2 ships, lots of profits to be taken, lots of hype around nullsec and things like that as well. I would say the last 2 weeks or so, but now I would even dare to say that the announcement from CCP a little bit of a downer on all of that. Everyone is like, is this the direction we're going? What about EVE Online? What about the game we're playing? Where are those announcements? So we're holding our breath, and we're gonna see what comes up towards the 20 years of EVE Online. That's it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.